Oh, Hassan, over to you. Thanks a lot.
Great. So in this 1 hour and 30-minute sessions, we are basically going to understand how Google Analytics 4 works and how it is different from Universal Analytics. The main purpose of this session is not to understand how we can implement different kind of events like e-commerce event or general tracking event on a website, rather than just how we can see different kind of reports in Google Analytics and how we can use that data so that we can better understand the traffic that is coming on our website. I will be conducting this session. My name is Shehzada Ali Hassan, or you can just simply address me as Hassan. I am working on Upwork right now, and you can find me at my email address, or you can visit the website. You can just click on any of the links, and it should take you to wherever you want. So these are the things that I have planned that we will discuss in this session. We will not discuss the very generic things such as how you can create a GA4 account or very simple things that are very basic. We will just rather look at different interface and how it is different from Universal Analytics. That will be the main topic of this one. However, if we get more time at the end, we will definitely want to look at custom reports, because this is the place where you are definitely going to spend most of your time when you are working with Google Analytics 4. And in the next session, we will be looking at Google Tag Manager and implementation through for GA4. This is the demo account that we are going to use. This is Google Merchandise Store. If you will click on this link, it will directly take you to this page. On this page, you will have these two links. One is for GA4 property, and then the other one is for Universal Analytics. I have opened both of them side by side, so we can actually see where the data is being different in both of these accounts and how we can work and how we can understand based on this GA4 property. All right. So the first most important question is that why we are switching to GA4. Previously, we only had one reason, that GA4 was a new and better version of Google Analytics. But right now, Google has said that they will be removing Universal Analytics after 1 year. So you will still have access to all the data that you had in Universal Analytics. However, after 1 year, it won't be processing any new information that you're sending back to UA. So you need to kind of go to GA4 right now. GA4 is highly under maintenance right now, so all the interface can change after we have done this meeting. So not right after we have done this meeting, but maybe in a month or so. So just don't get scared if you see that the reports are not there, something has changed in the navigation bar. They will still be there. It's just they might be rerouting everything, because previously we had around 12 different sections here, like analytics hubs and everything was under there, but now they have simplified the reports and all the other section in GA4. So just keep in mind that everything can change in GA4. It is under maintenance. The main benefit of Google Analytics 4 is that it is highly privacy based, because moving forward, most of the browsers are going to disallow working with third-party cookies. That means GA4 will only be working with first-party cookies that are created by either Google Tag Manager or GTag.js directly on the website. And any third-party cookie that is related to tracking will not be captured or will not provide any information back to GA4. So, and it uses machine learning under the hood, so it can provide more insightful data that you can see inside Google Analytics dashboards. We have two options. Either we can go with discussing Google Analytics 3 and Google Analytics 4 differences, or we can look at the interface of Google Analytics 4 first. I think it is always better if you can understand the differences, because you already know how Universal Analytics works, and it will be easier for you guys to switch from Universal Analytics to GA4. So I think this will be a much better option for us to go forward. Great. If you want, if you haven't created a GA4 property, I said that we will not discuss it, but you can either go to this website and hit sign into analytics. If you already have an account, what it will do is that it will take you to a GA4 account or Universal Analytics account that you might already have on your website. And once you are there, you can switch to admin section on any Google Analytics property that you might have. Just go to admin, and then you can click on create a new property from there, and you can have as many as property as you want. If you are on GA4, you can click on this blue button which says create a new property. If you are on Universal Analytics, then it will ask you for two things. You can either create a property from, let me refresh the page. I don't think it loaded correctly. So in Universal Analytics page, you have two options. You can either use a setup assistant. You can use a setup assistant to create a GA4 property, or you can always hit this blue button to create a property. A setup assistant is something which Google has introduced so that it makes things easier for us to implement GA4 on our website. But I don't recommend working with GA4 setup assistant. The main reason for that is when you will create a property from this one, what it will do is that it will link your original Universal Analytics with GA4. That means all the events that are coming into Universal Analytics through gtag.js, they will automatically be sent with Google Analytics 4. And we don't want that. The main reason for not wanting that is that the event structure is completely different in Universal Analytics, because all the events that are going into Universal Analytics has a category, action, and label, whereas GA4 works on a completely different model. We will see how the event model is different in both of them. But the better option is that just click on this create property button and then create a GA4 account from there. Okay, now that's aside. Let's say these are the major differences between Universal Analytics and GA4. The main difference between Universal Analytics and GA4 is that previously when we were working with Google Analytics, we had to implement two separate tracking systems. Universal Analytics is for the web, and if we wanted to track our mobile application, we had to implement Firebase SDK on our website. But when we are working with GA4, we can actually use the same Google Analytics 4 account to track all the website data, Android data, and iOS mobile applications. So you might have different data streams. Data stream is something where all the data is coming inside to GA4. You can access a data stream under admin and then property column. So this data stream is where all the data is coming inside GA4. So you don't need actually different data streams if you are working with multiple domains and subdomains. You just need one data stream for websites, and then you can use this measurement ID. The measurement ID is very similar to how tracking ID works in Universal Analytics. So you can use this measurement ID to track your top level domains, subdomains, and any kind of other domain that you might have. So you don't actually need any kind of other streams. If you hit add a new stream for web, it will actually show you a message that a single web stream might be enough and you don't need more than one web stream to track. However, you can have more than one stream if you want. Also make sure that you don't delete a web stream, because it does not give you a warning and it will automatically delete your web stream. And if a data stream is deleted, it will delete all the data that you might have in your Google Analytics work. So make sure that you never delete a property unless you want to delete a property. The thing is different for Android. If you want to track any data for mobile application, you have to create separate data streams for each mobile application. It is not similar to how web works. So if you have two different applications and you want to track their data inside one GA4 property, so you actually need to create two separate Android streams or iOS streams. So this is one of the things that is important, and you should know that right off the bat. Let's discuss the difference between Universal Analytics and GA4. The first important difference is the hit types. So in Universal Analytics, we had 4 different kind of hits. Hits is something that Universal Analytics whole tracking system model is based on. You might remember that if you will go to the admin section and try to create a custom definition, a custom dimension, then you might have 4 different kind of dimensions. One is the dimension can be either based on event hit, e-commerce hit, page hit, a social interaction, and something like that. So based on these are the 4 different kind of hits that we had in Universal Analytics. However, in GA4, everything is based on events. So there are basically just one kind of hit, and that is event hit. So anything that is that was categorized differently in Universal Analytics, they are simply an event. So page view was a separate thing in Universal Analytics, but it is an event. And any kind of social interaction is an event. E-commerce transactions are event. User timing is an event. And pages and screen views are also events. So anything that we had in Universal Analytics under different hit category, they are just events in Universal Analytics. So there is one differentiation, like how we are tracking e-commerce transactions in GA4. If anything has an item object in a transaction, then that will automatically be counted as that will automatically be counted as an e-commerce hit. For example, if you will visit the documentation of Google Analytics 4, you might see that what it requires to be an e-commerce transaction. So anything that has this item object, this is like the product object which we had in Universal Analytics, which contains all the information of a particular product, and it also requires the same name for the event. So a transaction event can only be for view item list, view item, select item, add to cart, view cart, purchase event. So anything, if you are sending a different name, maybe you are sending let's say app underscore purchase or maybe custom underscore purchase, then that will not work. It has to follow the same naming convention, and it has to have this item variable for GA4 to understand that this was an e-commerce event. So this is an important thing. If because in Universal Analytics you can actually send any kind of name back to GA4. Universal Analytics, you can have it as transaction, e-commerce, anything, and it you just need to make sure that the e-commerce tracking override was working. But in GA4, it is a little different with that. So just bear in mind that hit types are different. So we don't have any kind of hits in GA4. It is just event, and everything is just based on event. So the next thing is actually event. Uh, Event is where the main difference occurs in Universal Analytics and GA4. So in Universal Analytics, we had different categories. So every event was inside behavior, then events and top events, and every event has three different things. They were categorized in category, and then they had event action, and each event action has its own event label. So these are the three things where events were categorized into different sections. However, in GA4, we don't have anything similar to this structure. So if we want to track any parameter, if you want to track any parameter in GA4, we just need to make sure that we are sending that parameter when the event fires on the website. That parameter can be page title. I have mentioned some of them. Page title, page location, page path. These are the generic ones which were created by Google Analytics, and these are also present in GA4. You don't need to create these parameters. These are the ones that are automatically generated when Google Analytics 4 configuration tags fired on the website. This also makes a difference in sessions. We will see that when we are looking at the sessions tab in the same slide. But the main reason between page views and screen, the main difference between page views and screen views is that page views are anything that is coming from your website, and screen views are anything that are coming from your mobile application. So if a user opens a mobile page, then this is where they will be sending a screen view back to Google Analytics. And if a user visit a particular page on your website, then that is where they are sending a page view request back to GA4. All right. The main difference comes with the session, because in GA4, sessions are calculated completely differently than Universal Analytics. A session, by the way, is a group of events that the user take in a particular time frame. In Universal Analytics, every session was 30 minutes, but in GA4, we do have the option to update the session time. Anything that you want to update in a particular data stream, you can simply go to that data stream and select that. If you will scroll all the way down, you will see there is an option for more tagging settings. Once you will click that, there you can find session timing. You can actually adjust how much time you want the session to last for. If you want a particular session to be counted for 55 minutes, if you want it to count for 7 hours, the maximum time for a session can be 8 hours. It cannot not longer than 8 hours. And you can adjust the time based on your session. Actually, none of my clients have actually changed the session time, but this is one of the options that we have inside GA4. When a user lands on a website, there are a few events that fires by default. The first event that fires by default is a session start event. So whenever a user visit any page of your website, the first event that is going to fire is a session start event. A session start event is something that tells Google Analytics 4 that the user has engaged with the website. That is one of the reasons that we don't have bounce rate in Google Analytics 4. In Universal Analytics, we have bounce rate if the user goes to a website and then they don't do anything, and then they leave the website. That is when the bounce rate goes to 100%. But in GA4, we don't have this bounce rate option. The main reason for that is that when the user lands on the website, everything is event. And we don't have interactive or non-interactive events. Everything is just a standard event in GA4. So the alternate for bounce rate is engagement rate. We do have an option of engagement rate where we can see how long the user was engaged in our website. You can find that under any page, any report that you might have. All the reports that you have are in GA4 under reports and then the reports section, pages and screen. So you can find all the events that the user did here and any kind of other detail that you want to see. This is the average engagement time, and this is kind of the alternate of bounce rate. And this is what you get. You don't have an equivalent of bounce rate here in GA4. Yeah, one important distinction is this one, that in Universal Analytics, a session restarts if the UTM parameters are updated. For example, on this page, we have some UTM parameters called UTM source, UTM medium, and UTM campaign. In Universal Analytics, if you update the UTM campaign parameter in between a session, it starts a new session for the same user. So that means Universal Analytics will think that a different user has visited the website and it will start a second session for the same user. However, in GA4, it does not work like that. If you will update the session, if you will update the UTM parameters in between a session, that will not do anything. That will not create a new session. That will not have any effect on the user's traffic acquisition whatsoever.
Quick question. You got a question from Mansi. She's asking in which situations would a client want to extend the session duration? Because you mentioned it can go up to even 8 hours, right? So what kind of business would want to track a session for 8 hours? What kind of business would want to track a session for 1 hour, 30 minutes? Is there any examples or samples that you can share with us?
It depends based on what kind of client we are dealing with, because let's say you are working with a banking website where the user has to submit a particular form. Most of the banking website, they provide an option for the user to save a form at a particular point, because their forms are not small. They ask for 100 different things, and it can take a user up to an hour to submit that form completely. So what most of the users do is that they have the website open on one page and they are collecting the information one by one on a different page. So in that situation, you might want to have a session time longer than that, because if the user stays open, keep their website open for more than 30 minutes, but don't interact with that, that is where the session ends for that user. But in this banking kind of situation where the form takes too long or the user journey is actually too long on the website, maybe they need to connect with someone on a call, and then the user has to guide them through the application process, or they need to do some kind of verification while they stay online on the website. That is where you want the session time to be longer. You don't want the session to end. The other example is when you want the session time to be smaller than 30 minutes. That is where you are, let's say, working on a crypto-based website where transactions happen in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and usually the user does not stay longer than that. So there you want to see that how many, let's say you want to decrease the session time to 15 minutes or 20 minutes, you can do that. It is just an option that you have available. It entirely depends on your client, what kind of website they are dealing with and how you want to adjust the session time. By default, 30 minutes works fine, because if the client had Universal Analytics implemented on the website, they did not have the option to adjust the session time. So if session time in GA4 and Universal Analytics are same, they can actually cross-reference somewhat data between both of these analytics platforms. So yeah.
Understand. Mansi, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Hassan. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Thanks for answering that. Yeah.
So on top of that, Hassan, I got a follow-up question, right? So is there even an option to disqualify a user on the site for sessions longer than 2 hours, for example?
You mean don't count the user for?
Yeah. So say for example, I'm on a e-commerce site, right? I'm on a marketplace, and then I suddenly have to go for like a 2-hour meeting, and I just leave my page open, right? So is there any option to disqualifying a user session in this case?
What do you mean by disqualifying a user session? You mean you don't want to record that session?
Yeah, I mean, we want to record the session, but is there an option to filter and make our reporting a lot more precise, just for the sake of reporting? As an example, you know, if there's a question coming from the client side asking for this requirement.
Not really. What we can do is that we can build a custom report, because we don't have filters in GA4 per se. We can actually add limitations inside the data stream. We can go to admin and add either the filter inside the account level here, add filters on this one. And based on these filter, we can actually add or remove something. Or what we can do is that we can go to data stream and then select the data stream and add any kind of that we want here. But the particular thing that you are asking is excluding a session where the user engagement time is less or more than a particular section. So what we can do is that we can build a custom report for that. So we can build any kind of custom report in Google Analytics for it. Is very similar to how we had the customization tab in Universal Analytics. So in this report, what you can do is that, let's say you have a conversion funnel report and you want to exclude all the users whose engagement time is less than some minutes or some hours. So what you can do is that you can create a filter for that. And we will look at this one after we get some time. So you can have a metrics for engagement time.
Yeah.
And then you can, I don't think I have access to this report. However, you can create a filter for that. And in the filter, you can exclude or include a particular user. For example, in this one, it says that the user typically registers to the website after they have spent around 12 hours. Usually if they visit the website, and it takes them 12 hours to submit the first registration. And for the this event, it takes them roughly 13 hours. And there is around 9-second difference between registration and the sign up event. So yeah, you can actually filter the events, but not on the account level. You can do that on reporting level.
Yeah, I mean, it's good enough to know. Yeah, I mean, the team could then explore what kind of filters there are new for GA4 as compared to UA. Then. Oh, good. Thanks, Hassan.
Hassan, can I ask a question on like the example you gave just now?
Yeah, sure.
Like the 12 hours, right? The one you said. Yeah. So means that does it mean that, let's say if my session it's like set for 30 minutes, right? Will it kind of register that? Like register for 12 hours? Must I like switch my session to 12 hours for this to be like, you know, registered into the elapsed time?
Not really. This is not the session time. This is just telling that the first.
Hello?
Seems like Hassan's mic is disconnected. Still can see his mouse moving, so give it a minute. Oh, Hassan, we can't hear you. We can only see your mouse moving. Oh, can anyone hear Hassan? No, right?
Hassan, you are on mute.
No.
Oh, Hassan is on mute. Let me just see if I can ask to unmute. Hey, Hassan, looks like you're on mute.
Oh no.
Angeline, you scared of Hassan?
Huh? Yeah. Oops.
Scared of Hassan.
Yeah.
Maybe he's on like a earphone that caused that just disconnected.
Maybe he's very excited to reply me and start pressing buttons.
Let's just give him a few minutes to sort of try to reconnect his headphones or whatsoever.
Okay.
So what I'm saying that this time, it does not depend on the session time itself. So it does not mean that the session start and the registration event had like 24 different sessions, because if let's say the time is 30 minutes, then up to 12 hours, it may take 24 sessions for the user from session start to registration. But it is not depending on the session time. The user can actually go from session start to registration in one session or in 2 different sessions. But this is telling us that the difference between those 2 sessions were roughly 12 hours apart. So if the user visited the website first, then it typically takes them 12 hours to register to the website, and then a sign up takes 9 seconds, and then registration take an additional 13 hours from this sign up.
So does that mean that the user had 4 sessions within this period of time?
They can have more than 4 sessions or less than 4 sessions. We do have a variable inside Google Analytics 4, which is called session count, and it tells us that how many sessions a user did on a website. But I did not have access to this report. Yes, we do have an option for looking at how many sessions a user did on a particular platform. Session count. This is engaged session. So this tells us that how many sessions totally they were done by a particular user, or per user how many sessions they were. So we do get the option to see that, but not in your term what you are asking.
Okay, so then I think it's a bit I mean, I might be a bit confused. Like, okay, so if let's say I set a session as 30 minutes, right? And then I'm saying that you know, like the according to just now that page, right? It doesn't mean that I have to change my session to 12 hours, right? Then what's the difference? Like I don't have to change, right? I mean, it doesn't make a difference.
In a general case, no, you don't need to make any changes to the session time. It works fine. As I said, that Universal Analytics did not have an option to update the session time, and the GA4 is by default on 30 minutes, but you do have the option to update the session time if you want to for a particular client, if that suits their conditions. But usually 30 minutes is just fine, because let's say even if this is a banking website and user has to engage with the website, session usually ends if the user does not make any new event on a website for 30 minutes. So if you will make a session time for more than 8 hours, so what it will do is that if the user has logged out and they come back after 7 hours to the website, it will record all the things under one session. It will not create a second session for that. That means the number of session count is going to go very low for your same user. And there will be a lot of differences between your Universal Analytics account and your GA4 account.
Okay, so mainly it's just for me to figure out like how many session counts there are, because like every 30 minutes it comes in, and then I'll record it as one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, get it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So every 30 minutes, there will be a new session, and it will show you that the user has did 4 different sessions or 5 different sessions. For example, this report right here, it shows us that this particular country, it had 64 users, and total sessions that these 64 users did was that 106 sessions were made by these users. So whereas these users, they are typically making 3 sessions per user. So depending on if you will increase your session time, it will decrease the number of sessions per user and the total number of sessions that the user is doing on the website. So I think by default 31 is fine. I was mentioning the session based on these URL parameters. So if you update the URL parameters in the mid of the session of a particular user, then in Universal Analytics, this would reset the whole session, because if the UTM parameter gets updated, it starts a new session for that user. But in GA4, it does not work like that. The next thing is custom dimensions and matrices. In Universal Analytics, we do have the option of custom matrices and dimensions. Dimension is anything where you cannot implement any kind of arithmetic operation, but matrix is something where you can do any kind of mathematical calculation. So you can add a number inside a matrix. So a matrix can be any kind of number or anything where you want to do an operation on that. So let's say the value of total event or how much time a user is spending on the website. Whereas custom dimension, these are properties of a particular event. In the very first slide, we saw that we have different kind of hits, and hits are translated as scope in custom dimensions. So a hit can be either session hit or a session scope, hit scope, user scope, e-commerce scope, or product scope, based on different one in universal analytics. But in GA4, we don't have these different dimensions. Everything is either an event scope or a user scope. We don't have a session scope anymore, and anything inside for to be counted as an e-commerce event, I mentioned that it has to have the same name and this item object for it to be counted as an e-commerce hit or e-commerce event. If you want to create custom dimensions in GA4, everything is inside configure. So if you want to create custom audiences, that is inside configure. If you want to create custom definitions such as custom matrices or custom metrics, that is inside here. If you want to create conversions, that is also inside this configure tab. In universal analytics, we can create goals inside the admin section and then going to the goals. But goals are very similar to how conversions are marked in GA4. So this is where you can create custom dimensions. So custom dimensions are of two types. It can either be event type or it can be a user type. So anything that you will send as a user custom dimension, this will be attached to all the events that the user is doing on a website. A very common example of implementing a user is a user event type is user ID. A user ID is a unique number or string that we usually generate for a particular user who has signed into the website. So if a user signs into the website, we can actually create a string for that. And if that string is not present, we can have the client ID working as the user ID for that particular user. Client ID is similar to the client ID in Google Analytics. So the cookie that is created on the website, this Google Analytics cookie, this is the client ID for the same user. It just contains the timestamp and a particular client ID for that. You can actually see all the behaviors of a user based on the client ID. So you can see what event they did on a website and things like that. We will see how we can build these reports. Yes, there is a question that can GA4 goals can be connected to Google Ads? By default, yes. You can go to the admin section on your GA4 account and just make sure that your accounts are linked between Google Analytics 4 and Google Ads. Here you can click on Google Ads links and it will ask you to connect your website. Before doing that, you also need to make sure that your data sharing settings are turned on. This is what falls under Google Signals. Google Signal is it's kind of like a remarketing for Google Ads, because we discussed that Google Analytics 4 is very much a user privacy based. That means it does not collect any kind of user data by default. You have to give it permission so that it will collect all the user information. You have to hit I acknowledge and all the other fields in there. And then you can connect your website you connect your Google Analytics 4 account with your Google Ads. And then in your Google Ads, you can simply import the conversion like you used to import for Universal Analytics. So there are three things that you need to do. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your event is marked as a conversion. So all the events that you are sending to your Google Analytics 4 account, you can go to configure and then events. This is where you can see all the events that are coming in. And let's say you want to mark a particular event as a conversion. So let's say this phone event, whenever someone is clicking on a phone, you want to mark this event as a conversion. So once you will hit this slider, this is a conversion now. You don't need to do any additional configuration on this one. So if you will go to conversion, you can see all the events that you have marked as conversion. So now the phone is a conversion event. Also keep in mind that the conversion will only start tracking once you will create those. So any event that was previously recorded, they will not fall under the same conversions. Once the conversion is created, after this point, it will start capturing all the data. And GA4 can take up to 72 hours to actually start capturing new events or new conversions. So once you have marked it as a conversion and you have linked your Google Ads account from admin, now you can go to your Google Ads account and you can simply import this information from the measurement and then go to the same place where you will add the conversion from Universal Analytics, you can add the same conversion from here. Okay, we do have one more question. We have to. No, you don't need to delete your GA4 account if. So the question is that they have created some GA4 accounts using the setup assistant on Universal Analytics. So they are asking that if we can delete the GA4 account. You don't actually need to delete the GA4 account. What you can do is that you can go to your Universal Analytics, just switch to the Universal Analytics account which you are using. Click on GA4 setup assistant again. And at the very bottom, if your website is connected with a GA4 account, it will show up here. So what I can do, let's say I will connect this one with this. So this is the structure that you will see if your Universal Analytics is connected with GA4. So any event that is coming into this Universal Analytics account through GTag, this will automatically be sent back to this GA4 property. That means there is a possibility that we can track duplicate events and we don't want that. So what you can do is that simply hit disconnect. And what it will tell you that you have to manually configure your all GA4 account, and that is fine because you are actually going to track all the Universal Analytics and GA4 events separately. So you can hit continue, and what it will do is that it will disconnect both of the properties. It should disconnect both of these properties. And that's pretty much it. You don't need to delete anything. You just need to disconnect both of them. I think the same option exists under GA4 too. You can go to GA4, go to admin, and then data stream. Select the data stream that you want to disconnect it with. Let me see. All right, so you can go to admin, data stream, and select the data stream where you want to disconnect something. And this is where you will see any site that is connected to your website. It says managed connected site tags. So right now, none of the website are connected to this one. If your Universal Analytics was connected to this one, you will see one connected, and you can disconnect it from here, or you can disconnect it from this Universal Analytics account. Both of the options are fine wherever you want. So once you will disconnect it, it will say that this is not connected with any particular. I think that answers the question.
Yeah. So how about all these goals here? Because if now we are using the Google set up GA4 setup assistant on the UA to set up the GA4, right? Then some of the goals on the UA is not it won't be automatically imported to the GA4, right?
Exactly. GA4. Either way, if you will connect this one with your by the default setup, it will still not capture all the goals to the GA4. You have to create the goals separately, and goals are very different than Universal Analytics, because in Universal Analytics you might remember that you can add different conditions based on a destination. If you want this particular URL to be called a goal, or if you want a particular event to be a goal, what you need to do is that provide an event category and event action, and then that thing will be an event goal. But in GA4, everything is just under the event. You just need to make sure that you mark that event under configure, and it should be fine. But yes, you need to configure the goals separately. In order to configure the goal, you just need to make sure that that event is coming inside the GA4. So if the event is coming into GA4, you can just mark it as a conversion, and this is now a goal for you.
Okay, so after we connected, then by default, some group of the events it will be automatically created under the GA4, right?
If the Universal Analytics is connected with
yep.
GA4.
Yep. Okay, good.
The duplication, it depends, because if you are using the analytics.js, there are a few methods that how you can connect your GA4 account, how you can implement your Universal Analytics tracking on the website. If you will go to the admin section of your Universal Analytics account, switch to the tracking info and then tracking code. You might see that this is the newer one, which is based on gtag.js. All the config tag, it has gtag configuration setup. So anything which is connected through this GTag setup, this will automatically send data to Universal Analytics and GA4 if both of them are connected right here. But if both of the accounts are not connected, then it will not send the data. If you are using any CMS, maybe Shopify or WordPress, then those uses an older version of Google Analytics. They don't use this gtag.js setup. They use analytics.js. Analytics.js is an older version of implementation of Universal Analytics, and that does not send data back to GA4. So if you had analytics.js, then it is fine. But either way, it is recommended that you don't connect both of your websites, just so that you can track both the events separately in GA4. Usually, a GA4 account, a tag manager account, when it is implemented, it has a different tags for Universal Analytics, and it has different tags for GA4. So each events are tracked separately. Let me see if you can see that. So this is the same account which is sending all the data inside this Enhanza account, the Universal Analytics as well as GA4. They have same number of goals created. So what we did is that we created the same goal inside Universal Analytics, and then we went to GA4. We set up the events through Google Tag Manager, and then we created all the events. So that event that we just marked as a conversion for phone, this is the event which is sending the information back to GA4. So this tag fires whenever a user clicks on a phone button, and this sends data back to GA4. And then this is where we have marked that event as a conversion, this phone event. So you actually need this event, and an equilateral event for this one would be here. So this is sending data to the Universal Analytics, and this is sending data to GA4 account. So both of them are separate tag based on the same trigger. It is just sending different information to GA4. The event names are same. I'm also sending some additional information such as user ID. We will look at the user ID later in a bit. So yeah. Yes, if you have the gtag.js set up for Universal Analytics and you have connected your GA4 account with your Universal Analytics, then it will track all the events twice, because GA4 uses the gtag implementation. If you will go to the admin section and then switch to your data streams and click any of the data stream that you want to implement on your website. If you're using Google Tag Manager, then you will use the measurement ID, which shows up right here, and it's not showing right now. Let me refresh the page. So you can use two options. You can either use the measurement ID, which I'm using here. So this is sending all the information back to this measurement ID. But if you want to implement it directly using GTag, so you will see that both the code are exactly the same. It's just the configuration in Universal Analytics sends data back to UA, and it's only this line is different for Universal Analytics and GA4. So that means any information that you are creating for Universal Analytics and they are using GTag, then the events will be duplicated. Otherwise, everything will be tracked separate. And it is recommended that you track everything separate. All right. Does that answers the questions?
Yeah. So basically, we just have to treat it as UA and GA like a separate, like the entity, is it?
Yes. And
Okay.
you have to create them separately and implement them separately too, so that you can actually have more control on the events.
Okay.
All right.
Can I ask if we were to like track like maybe from a specific CRM, right? How can we incorporate that data? Let's say
You mean,
Shopify.
for example, can we take Shopify as an example?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So let's say you have a Shopify store and you want to track e-commerce events. So by default, when you are implementing Universal Analytics, what you will do is that Shopify will automatically track all the events for us. But if we want to track anything for Google Analytics 4, we have to implement the data layer first. So data layer is how Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4 will know that if a particular event has fired on the website or not. What I usually like to work with is data layer. So I implement data layer on a website. So let's say if we are working with Shopify, I would like to implement a data layer for the Shopify first. So let's say if you are working with the purchase event, so I would write this code. I will copy and paste the same code inside the checkout settings order page. And what it will does is that it will fire a custom purchase event, and it will has all the information about that particular event. So all the events such as transaction ID, value, shipping, tax, coupon, and items. This structure, this is based from this data layer event. The same structure they have provided here: transaction ID, affiliation, value, tax, and everything. Once this is implemented on the website, then in Google Tag Manager, we will create a tag for this one. And then we will capture this information and send it back to GA4. So your question, if we are working with a CRM, then we have to build all the work from ground up. You have to implement the data layer on the website. You have to set up Google Tag Manager on that website, and then you need to configure the Google Tag Manager to send all the events back to GA4. So yes, it requires a lot more work to implement GA4 on a website, because all the CMS right now, they does not support GA4 integration. Yes, there are two different documentation for data layer inside GA4 and Universal Analytics, and they don't work side by side with each other. So let me show you a documentation for Universal Analytics. It just, the structure is different. However, we are sending the same information back to GA4 and Universal Analytics. In GA4, the structure of the purchase event is different, and in Universal Analytics, it is a little different. Let me show it side by side. All right. So we have e-commerce object, and then we have everything inside that e-commerce object. But inside Universal Analytics, inside Universal Analytics, where did it go? Up again. Purchase. So everything is that in e-commerce, that there is another object called purchase, then there is another object called action field, and then there is ID, affiliation, revenue. The naming of some things are also different. For example, it is ID, and then it is transaction ID in GA4. Then we have revenue, then we have value, and then the naming of the products is also different. It is called products, and then it is called item. The previous documentation that I was showing you for Shopify, that is based on this particular one. So, yes, the documentation is also different, and you need to implement all the events. Yes, they are mostly single object inside GA4. Everything is just inside the GA4. You can refer to this documentation page if you want.
Thanks.
All right.
So Hassan, so in order for us to track for the e-coms set up for the e-coms tracking, right, we have to implement the data layers for each like add to cart, checkout on the Shopify.
Yeah.
Is it correct?
Yes, it is correct. We have to implement the data layer for add to cart, view item, list, and all the other events that we want to track.
Okay. So is there any like pre-built script we can found on the Shopify to like set up all these data layers in order for the GTM can read the data of transactions?
Yes, there are. I have written this one, and I uses this one for any kind of website that I work with. But this one highly rely on cookies and session storage. So this is the only reason I don't like working with this one. I usually contact the developer team, whoever is working on the Shopify store, and they usually handle building this data layer for us. So, but yeah, I can share the link of this data layer video. There is one more, and I think that person has also written a very good data layer for you. I will share that. I think it's called technical something. Yeah, this is. So they have also built a data layer for Shopify. What you need to do is that paste this code inside the head of all the pages, and this will automatically track all the events. So this one is based on Universal Analytics, and this is a generic one. The only problem I find with this one is that they don't have a proper structure. So everything is out of structure for this one. So they are using the older one where products, IDs, and SKU are mentioned, but that does not matter in Google Tag Manager implementation. You can actually map each event separately. So for example, let's say this phone was not a phone event. Let's just discuss it as an e-commerce event. So now you want to map the transaction ID. So you will just write transaction underscore ID here, and my spellings are horrible. And then you will insert the variable, the data layer variable, whichever has that value. So let's say if the developer has built the data layer based on Universal Analytics, then everything will be inside e-commerce dot purchase dot action fields dot ID. Yeah. So it will be same. If you already have universal analytics data layer implemented on the website, you can actually capture all the data layer objects one by one and assign them to the naming of the data layer based from the documentation, and then send it back to GA4. So this is what you can actually do if you already have a data layer implemented. Data layer will be different for, no, data layers are not different for different CMSs such as WooCommerce, Shopify. The data layer is the same. It's just the code is different, because if you are working with Shopify, this particular documentation, this uses the liquid template language. So this one is using, this one will only work if you are using this code on Shopify. If you will put this code inside WooCommerce or any other CMS, then that will break the website and it will actually not work. If you are working with WordPress, there is a very good plugin called WordPress Google Tag Manager by, I don't remember the name of the guy, but this one, GTM for WordPress plugin, GTM for WP. This is one of the greatest plugins that I have worked with when implementing Google Analytics for on a website. So they have the plugin is completely free. You can download the plugin, configure this on your website. The settings are also straightforward. You can go to advanced settings and then just enable GA4 e-commerce tracking, and everything will work fine. So they already have tag manager basics, and they have a complete guide on how to implement the tag using GTM4W. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks, Hassan. I think all this data layers is very helpful for us also when we are because most of our tag is using the Google Tag Manager.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It is the same thing. If you are either using tag manager, if you are using the GTag default code, the main difference I prefer working with Google Tag Manager is that let's say there are two different persons. One is managing the digital marketing team, and then the other one is your development team. So there are two departments which are managing the same website. So if you want to make any changes for your tracking, you have to contact your developer again and again. But if they will just build the data layer for us, you can actually track all the events that you want. If you want to send any other parameter with this event, you can add a new row and send that additional parameter with that. So right now we are capturing the user's Firebase ID and sending it with each event back to Google Analytics 4 when this phone event fires. So yes, it completely depends on you how you want to implement. Google Tag Manager is recommended because then you can use the same data layer object to send that event to a Facebook conversion API when you're implemented for iOS 14 users, or if you have maybe HubSpot or Outbrain implemented. So you can use the same data layer and extract the product information and send it back to Facebook Pixel, Facebook Conversion API, Google Analytics 4, or any other platform. So working with data layer is recommended, but it is not necessary. You can use GTag code or you can use the data layer code however you want. The question about the Google Ads and Google Analytics working together, you can actually go to tools and settings. We actually missed this one. It slipped my mind. So you can go to tools and settings, and then under measurement, you can hit conversions. And this will open up the page where you will have a plus sign for new conversions here. And once you will hit create a new conversion action, it will ask you that if you want to set it up from the website or you want to import that from Google Analytics. So there are two different options. So anything that is inside your goals, that will be coming from Universal Analytics. If you have marked that as an event, then it will be coming from GA4. There are two options. One is from Firebase and one is from web. If you are using GA4 for your mobile application as well as your web application, then you will use the web one. Pretty soon this will be removed because previously GA4 was called web and app, but right now it is just GA4 now. Once you will hit next, it will show you all the events that you have created inside GA4. So we only have one conversion in Google Analytics 4 right now, so it will import that. This is a different account, so therefore the conversions are different. So now we have imported one conversion from Google Analytics 4. Now you will hit done, And you can see that this purchase event, this is coming directly from the website, from this Google Tag Manager tag, and then this one is coming from the Universal Analytics. All right. Okay, we can go ahead now. Great. So the next thing is content grouping, user ID and client ID. We have actually discussed it already, but let's just go over it so we understand it the same way. There are two drawbacks of implementing user ID. That is, if you have the same user and they have logged into your website, then you can create a user ID for that user and send it back to Google Analytics 4 with each event. So in this Google Tag Manager tag, this phone event, I showed you the Firebase ID. Right below the Firebase ID, we have two different parameters. One is called event parameter. So anything that will be associated with this particular event, we discussed the scope in GA4. We only have two kind of dimensions. One is event dimension, and then one is the user property. So anything that is sent under the user property, what Google Analytics 4 will do is that it will link all of those events that this user ID is doing under one session. So we can actually see what this user is doing from different devices. So if the user is coming in from desktop, tablet, mobile, or their laptop, we can actually see the same behavior of that user. However, if the same user has two different accounts, let's say they have two different login details for your website, and they have logged in from one account on their computer and then from a different ones from their mobile application, then in this case, we will not be able to track that user because the ID is completely different. And this is one drawback that the user ID has, because it cannot match different cross device sessions if the user ID is different. So it really helps if you're if you have implemented user ID on your website, then it can actually link cross domain, cross device sessions, which is a very powerful thing. If the user ID is not implemented on the website, then by default, the client ID will be associated to each user. We saw a report for that inside the Explore tab, where we had different. Not really. There is one question that by different user ID, does it mean different Gmail account? Not really. A user ID is a random generated number. You cannot actually send actual user information back to GA4. That will violate the user privacy policy on Google. So you cannot send first name, last name, phone number, email address, anything which helps you to uniquely identify a particular user. So this user ID, this is a randomly generated number which is generated by your CRM. So if you are, let's say, working on Shopify, when a user makes a purchase, what Shopify does is that it creates a variable for each user called customer.id. And that customer ID is very unique for that particular user. So if the same user uses the same email address to make another purchase on a website, it will still have the same customer ID on that user. But if the same user uses a different email to make a purchase on the Shopify store, then that user will have a different ID. So it depends how you are creating this user ID on your website. If your user ID is based on email address, then yes, each different Gmail will create a different user ID. So this is kind of the report that you can see on your client's account. If the user ID is present, then the user ID will be replaced. If the user ID is not present, then the client ID will dominate that particular field. Okay, so if we have two different Gmail accounts, yes, if you have two different Gmail accounts and you have your Firebase or whatever authentication system you are using on your CRM or at your backend, so usually most of the CRM and Firebase itself, they generate different client IDs based on different Gmail addresses or different email addresses. So to your question, generally yes. If your CRM generates a different ID for the same user using different Gmails, then yes, it will have different user IDs for the same user. This is the only drawback that we have with user ID. Other than that, it works fine. Great. In Universal Analytics, you might remember that this report was under audiences, and then here is a report called I think User Life Explorer. But in GA4, we don't have all of these built-in reports. We have to build most of the reports ourselves. So this is the custom reporting section where you will be spending a lot of time of yours. So maybe what we can do is that we can discuss. I think data collection is same inside GA4. I think I have already mentioned this. If you are trying to implement your Google Ads account, you need to make sure that you accept all the terms of Google Ads for data collection. You can find that under admin section, under your property column, and then it's under data collection itself. It's data settings and data collection. You just need to make sure that you accept all of these conditions, because by default they are not accepted. So once you will accept them, then it will automatically start capturing all the users data and send it back to GA4. We don't have custom tasks. Custom task was one of the most important thing that we used in Universal Analytics when we were trying to remove duplicate transactions in Google Analytics. So we don't have access to the custom task anymore. So it makes things a little complicated to remove duplicate transactions in terms of Google Analytics right now. We also don't have the timing event anymore. In Universal Analytics, we can actually send a timing event, but in GA4, we don't have that option anymore. In terms of Google Signal, the Google Signals only offer 4 different things right now. So it enables Google Analytics for remarketing. It gives us advertising options and all the other details. But right now, most of the things, we cannot do that with Google Signals right now. So we cannot export any data to BigQuery. We cannot build any dashboard based on that. We can actually not use user ID, which would be a better thing to do. But right now we cannot use any of these details for Google Signals. Google Signal is the same tracking event in Google Analytics 4. Sorry about that. So Google Signal is same events in Google Analytics 4. It's just with remarketing enabled. So any event that has a GA4 Google Signals enabled, they will be available for us in Google Analytics 4. We can create audiences based on that and things like that. We can go over this user interface, and then we can look at the reports, and then we should be done with this session, because we already have 20 minutes left, and 20 minutes is very low time, very less time. All right, let's look at the built-in reports first, and then we can look at how we can build custom reports in Google Analytics 4. There is one difference in real-time API. The real-time API in Google Analytics 4 does not allow us to look at active users at a particular time on a website. So in Universal Analytics, you can actually see how many users are on your website at a particular time, but in GA4, you cannot do that. It will always show you last 30-minute users. So this is a difference based on how the real-time API works in Google Analytics. We also discussed that there is a machine learning algorithm that is implemented on GA4, and any report that the machine algorithm thinks that it is better for you, it will show you that on the homepage. Or right, if you will click on the Insights tab in these reports. Just give me a second. All right, so if you will hit this Insights tab, it will show you all the reports that it's think are important for you based on the information that you are sending back to Google Analytics 4. You might have already seen the reporting tab. We don't have all the different reports in Universal Analytics. We had roughly 40 different reports, but in GA4 we are only left with I think 12 different reports. So there are 3 major sections. One is based on acquisition, then engagement, monetization, and then at the bottom you have user reports. User reports are pretty straightforward. This shows you what devices the users are using, and demographic report shows you all the demographic details of a particular user, their interest, and everything based on their language, country, gender, and things like that. The most important ones are acquisition reports. If you have connected your Google Ads account with your Google Analytics 4 account, then you can actually see Google Ads performance inside GA4. Let's switch to this demo account because this one does not have a Google Ads account linked with it. All right. So a similar report that you had in Universal Analytics, where you would go to acquisition, Google Ads, and this report where you can see your Google Ads data. So this test campaign had won these many clicks and it generated $557 of revenue. You can see that report under acquisition overview. Scroll down where you can find this view Google Ads report, and once you will click on it, it will show you a detailed report based on that. So you can look at report based on Google Ads campaign, ad groups, keyword, query, and all the other details. If you want to see how much revenue they are generating, you can just scroll right, and then it will show you all the conversions or all the transactions and total revenue based on that particular. We do have some questions. So I will... All right, so we have a question that GA4 is built around user privacy and first party data. So will the quality of the data will be affected? And the answer is yes. It will be affected if you are using GA4, but there is a workaround for that. So what you can do is that when you're configuring your Google Analytics 4, you can actually sign up for server-side tracking. Server-side tracking is where you can have a Google Tag Manager server container, and you can see that you can actually route this event through a server container. Once you will check this information, you can send user information with this one. So you can create your own user data. You can send the email of the user, phone number, first name, last name, a street, city, region, country, and all the other details. So what this will do is that if you are using server-side tracking, you can actually send real user parameters back to Google Analytics 4, and Google Analytics 4 can then enhance its data based on this information. So yes, there is a way, there is a workaround for tracking actual user data, but that is using server-side tracking, not the general Google Tag Manager tracking system. And yes, by default, the data quality is very low. So we can actually use server-side tracking to improve the data quality for any particular user. All right, I hope that answers the question. Either way, you can actually, inside your Google Analytics 4 reports, you can see different events based on these ads. If you will see on the top, it says event count. If you will hit all events, then you can actually select one of the events for which you only want to see the request. Let's say you want to see how many page views are happening against each ads campaign. Then you can see that this ad campaign generated 3,383 pages, and this one generated these many pages. Sorry, this one was conversion. These are pages 529 and 8483 and 5623. So you can actually see all kind of different data based on these reports. There are two more reports in GA4 under acquisition. One is called user acquisition and one is called traffic acquisition. The major difference between both of these reports is that this user acquisition report, this is based on first users data. That means the same user can go to your website using different channels. They can initially visit your website through Facebook, and then they can leave the website without making any conversion. They can go back to your website through Google Ads or maybe Google Organic, maybe Microsoft Ad. So the same user can have 2 or 3 different touch points on your website, and then they can finally do the conversion. So what Google Analytics 4 has done is that it has divided the reports based on 2 different acquisition settings. One is when the user is coming to your website for the first time, and the traffic acquisition report is when the user, this report is based on the overall sessions of all the users on your website. So you can switch from a default channel grouping to channel source, and then you can look at the report based on that. We don't have the option for custom channel grouping right now, but they have extended the list of default channel grouping. You can actually search for default channel grouping in GA4 and look at how many the channel grouping option that you might have right now. So you can use any of these ones and they will work by default. You have to mark them as a UTM medium for them to work. So if the UTM medium is email or e_mail or just email, then it will work fine. But affiliate, it has to be affiliate, and all right. Similar to how in Universal Analytics, you can add a secondary dimension. In GA4, the secondary dimension works with this plus sign. So once you will hit this plus, you can actually add any kind of custom dimension, user property, as long as it makes sense. So it will show you that. So let's say we can add either first user's data, first user medium, or you can add session acquisition of the whole user journey. So right now we can see session source along with session medium for all these users. So for direct, it's none. Google organic, there were 34,000 users. Google CPC, there were 11,500 users and things like that. You can scroll all the way to the left, and the similar thing on the previous report where you can see all the events, or you can just select one particular event from it. Similarly, you can see all the conversions, or you can select any one of the conversions that you have marked important for your website. Conversions are anything that are really important for your platform. Maybe if it is an e-commerce event, then there can be 4 different conversions. When the user is adding a product to your cart, or beginning checkout, or views the cart, or makes a purchase. So anything that is important for your business, anything that you might consider creating a goal for, that is a conversion on your website. So you can select a purchase event and it will show you only that particular event inside these reports. Then the second one is we have engagement reports. Under engagement, we have okay. Yeah, we do have one more session scheduled for next week. We can discuss the technical side of implementing Google Analytics 4 through Google Tag Manager in that one. But it's all right. We can focus on Google Analytics 4 for this one here. So in GA4, so what the general structure of these reports is that in the overview reports, you have the snippets of these reports. So if you can directly go to events report, or you can go from here, view events. You can directly go to pages and screen, or you can click on view pages and screen. Similar thing in acquisition overview. If you are on the acquisition overview dashboard, you can directly go to user acquisition, or you can scroll down to click user acquisition, or you can directly go to traffic acquisition. And then the third one is for Google Ads. So if you are under the events, this is where you can see all the reports based on your events. Once you will click on any of these reports, it will open a more detailed report for all the users that we're looking at right now. So let's say you want to see purchase event, you can add more number of rows in Universal Analytics. This is where you would add more number of rows. In GA4, it's on the top. So let's say you want to look at maybe begin checkout event. Once you will click on begin checkout event, it will open a different report, and any custom dimension on any custom parameter that you are sending with this event, they will show up under the same report. So right now they are sending page title, page location, and page reference. Although these were the default, right now they are implemented by default, but when this GA4 property was set up, these were not implemented by default. So what they did is that they have made their own custom dimensions for this. So this is where you will see all the custom dimensions data inside an event. The pages and screen one, this is very similar to the report that we had in Universal Analytics for behavior, and then site content, and all pages one. This is the similar report that you might see. You have already saw that we don't have all the built-in reports. So any kind of report that you need, you have to build that yourself. So let's say you want to see all the landing pages report, where you had this one where you can actually see all landing pages of the users. If you want to see a similar report here, you might remember that we talked the first event that the user does on the website is a session start event. So what you can do is that you can filter this report based on session start. So all these pages now you are looking at, these are the landing pages, because this is where the session start event fired on the website. And if you want to see where the purchase event is firing on the website, you can actually select the purchase event, and it will show you on which particular page the purchase event is firing for these websites. So on home pages, there were 3 purchase event, and on the other pages, there were none of the purchase event fired. So this is how you can navigate around pages and screen. One important section that I think if you're working with different ads account is this advertising section. So what the advertising section did is that it only provided attribution model for Google Ads, but right now they are expanding this to incorporate other platforms too. So if you are sending data from your Facebook ads, your Google ads, and your other ads, you can actually see different attribution models inside Google Analytics 4. So let's say you can compare your last click model, or your first click model, or linear click model, or different kind of models that you might have. and compare how you think that the data might look like. So data-driven is based on the machine learning algorithm, which Google Analytics 4 think is responsible for generating a particular revenue or particular sale. The difference comes in when the user is coming from different channels, and then it is spending more time from one campaign than different time from the other one. For example, if a user came from Facebook ads and they, let's say, spend only 10 seconds on the website and then they left the website without doing anything, then the same user visited your website again through Google ads, and then they spent 30 minutes on your website and made a purchase on the website. So what data driven is going to do is that it will attribute 95% of that conversion to Google ads and 5% of that conversion to the Facebook ads. But the last click model or the first click model, what it will do is that if you will mark it as first click model, then it will attribute that sale to Facebook ads. If you will mark it as last click model, then what it will do is that it will mark that conversion to the last click channel. If you will go to the conversion path is a similar kind of like the same report. It just have a better visualization, and it can only show you one attribution at a time. So if you will, let's select the time decay model and see how that particular report will look like. So based on the time decay model, it says that only the organic search people are uh, uh, doing an early touch point, then middle touch point, and finally making a touch point. All the ones which are coming from the paid search, they don't spend any time on these early touch point. They just visit the website and make a purchase based on the first one. What we usually like to do, we usually like to work with the data driven model, and that is the only one. I think by default in your Google ads it is configured on last click model, but you can actually change it to data driven model, and this is a better option for us to work with in terms of attribution models. We did not touch Explore tab yet, and we don't have much time for that because it will take a lot more time. Maybe what we can do is that we can do a few answer questions and see how that goes. Is it fine? Can you break down the paid ad conversion by geolocation in GA4? If you want, yes, we missed one report inside the reporting tab. So if you will go to monetization and then select overview or e-commerce purchases, this is where all the conversion data is coming on your website. So this is very specific to your e-commerce purchases. So what you can do is that this is your all the product data, and what you can do is that you can add another dimension called city. I think you asked for city geolocation. Of course, the product does not have a city. You can build a custom report for that. So what a custom report is that you can build any kind of custom report. By default, they have a template gallery here, and you can start from any template gallery. So if we want to build an e-commerce report, let's go with that. So right now, what we are trying to do is build a report where we can see where the user is coming to our website when they make a purchase. So we don't need to see the source and medium of that traffic. Actually, we want to see from which country the user is coming from. So from United States, we had 2,500, and this much sale. China, we did not make any sale. India, we made these many sales, and this is it. Now, this one is based on all the users that are visiting our website. And if you want to filter out the reports, you can actually go to the filter tabs and then select source. Okay, let me just show you that how this report is actually built. So anything that you are looking at here in this report, whether it is a row or a matrix, this information is coming from this tab settings. So in the tab setting, you first have the options for what type of report you want to build. So this is a free-form report. That means you can build any kind of columns, any kind of rows and columns, and then you can populate the values in that. We have different reports based on funnels and path explorations and user lifetime, and we don't have enough time to discuss those. But yeah, and then we have rows. Rows are something that where we can populate the dimension of a particular thing, and then we can assign different values to that. And we can have different filters from the bottom of the screen. But anything that you want to use here, you have to import that inside variables first. So let's say you want to use a dimension. Let's say you want to use source here. So you only want to use UTM medium, where where the traffic is coming from a paid advertising. So first you need to import that dimension. So we are looking for, I think, a default channel grouping. Yeah, default channel grouping. So now we have the default channel grouping here. We can actually import the default channel grouping right next to those, and it will show us all the channel grouping based on their countries. We can actually break down the reports if we will place it under the columns, but we don't want to see all these ones. You mentioned that you only want to see only the paid. So you can create a filter based on this channel grouping. So if the channel grouping matches a regular expression where it is either paid or display, then this, if it is a paid ad or a display ad, then that means this is a paid ad for us. So if you will add a filter, it should have, let's do a contain. Let's do it one by one. I think I made a mistake in the spelling. Either way, you can create filters in this one. I'm not sure why the filter is not working right now, but usually it works fine without any issues. So once you will add a filter, it will filter the whole report based on that, and then you can actually see any kind of information that you want. Can we apply paid traffic segment in segments? Just give me one second. Yes, we do have segments option, and segments are a little different in Google Analytics 4. So they are called compare to, and you only have 5 different segments that you can add. You can add a compare section here and this will implement on all the website, and you can select what kind of thing you want to implement. Let's say you are looking for source. So if the session source is coming from any of these platforms, let's do Medium. Medium would be much better. So let's say if the user medium is CPC, if the user medium is CPC and just CPC. So if you will hit OK on this one and hit apply, what it will do is that it will filter out the same reports based on the filters that you have implemented on your website. Now it will show you all the users that are coming in from paid ads and doing anything on your website, and all the users that are coming from all the traffic of your website. So you can have different kind of segments here. A segment is just like a snapshot of all the reports. So you can go to events, or you can go to monetization and look at the e-commerce reports based on that. So you can add other sections, other comparison models, and compare the information of those events inside GA4. So yes, you do have the option of segmenting.
Okay, Hassan, sorry, I have one question. So can you explain more on data threshold? Because we realize full data is not reported within the GA4 dashboard when Google Signal data is selected in the data collection settings. Can you elaborate more on this?
Can you rephrase the question?
So, okay, can you go to acquisition? Okay, under data settings, data collection, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there's this Google Signal data collection. So you can either enable or disable it. So we realize when we enable this option here, the data is not reported is not fully reported in the under the in the main dashboard.
No, that's not really it. This is mainly concerned with the remarketing. It does not have anything to do with the dashboards. There can be a few issues with the dashboard because GA4 is highly under maintenance right now. So there can be other issues, but this data signal collection, it does not affect how the data is tracked or input.
Okay. PQ, are you there? PQ.
She just stepped out. Yeah,
but
I can help her elaborate on this a bit.
Okay.
So,
you know the case that we're having, right? With SSG, WSG, and MCF?
Yeah, so we activated the signal data collection in order to get the demographic data. I think that's what we were trying to do. But the moment we enabled it, there was a data threshold. And as a result, we lost a lot of data because we had more data than what was allowed.
Yeah. So do you have any explanation on that?
Not really, because the Google Signals does not affect data collection in terms of in GA4. It only affects ads personalization. So if you have turned it off, that is when it does not share all the information with your Google Ads account or any other third-party ad account that you might have linked with your GA4, but it does not affect any kind of data inside the GA4 that has been captured. Because any event that goes to GA4, how after how many time do you look at the reports? Like if the event is recorded today, it usually takes GA4 roughly 24 hours to process the data. It may show you the data in real-time view or in the debug view, but it takes it around 24 hours to 72 hours to process the data inside GA4.
Okay. Am I able to share my screen just to show that example to you?
Yeah,
Shane,
sure.
am I able to share or not, Shane?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, can.
Can okay.
Everyone can share.
Okay, are you seeing my screen, Hassan?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, so this is one example of a site that we switch on the data signal collection. On the 27th, you can see the number of hits drop, right?
Yeah.
This section here. And it was running for a good maybe 3 weeks when we realized that, it's probably because of the data signal, and we deactivated it for this particular site, and the data suddenly showed up again. So I think there's a relation between data signal collection and this report here. And you can also see over here, right? Thresholding applied. So I need to know what this is exactly. Yeah, the same happens to another site of mine. Sorry. Okay, so this is something similar that happened as well. So again, the report snapshot, there's this thresholding applied flagged out, and data dropped about the same time within this period here, and we somehow deactivated it, and it started to show up again. Let me just double confirm this traffic acquisition. Yeah, so for this site here, it's deactivated, so data is not really affected. But for this one, this particular GA4, you can see the drop in traffic, and we have this thresholding applied. So we are not able to solve this, unfortunately. So I was thinking whether you have any insights on this.
The spike in unassigned one, why that one has been spiked up, and I think this is the same for both of the accounts. You have similar settings running on both of them?
Let me just show you the data settings.
Hassan, if I may ask, right? So we know that from the threshold, what they mentioned there was that we need, they have a higher number of user count required in order to still show data when we enable that signals. Do you know what's the minimum threshold required, or is there any way we can find out?
Yeah.
No, I'm not familiar with the thresholds or why they get implemented to a website. Yeah.
It's okay then. Maybe we need to do a little bit of digging. Fabian, later we just discuss this after the call. Alrighty, I think that's it from me.
I mean, Hassan, if you don't mind, right? I could actually share with you Kai as well as Fabian's contact, and then if you can be part of that deciphering support, that would be quite helpful since you're the GA4 expert. So Kai, would that work if you guys actually have a chat separately with Hassan?
Yep, of course.
I think that would help. At least he's more familiar with the platform.
Yep, can.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Great. I think that's pretty much it then.
All right, cool. All right, a very good 1.5 hour session, right? Because initially I was thinking probably no one will ask questions, but then owing very frequently. So I believe, Hassan, you mentioned other officers weren't asking as many questions as we are in Singapore.
No, it's all right. Usually there are a lot of questions, but mostly they are from someone who is implementing Google Tag Manager, not from the digital marketing team. So yeah.
Okay, cool. I think it's more to the reporting side and deciphering, whether the data itself is actually accurate. So thanks a lot for today's session, Hassan. Looking forward
Thank you,
to
Hassan.
next week's session because it's more technical. And let's see, because I would have a chat and update from the team itself to see what are the aspects within GA4 that they would require more sharing from you, and we'll organize for more sessions thereafter.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.
All right, awesome, cool. All right, thanks a lot, Hassan. Any questions for Hassan before we close off today's session? All good?
Yep, all good.
That's it.
Yep.
Right, thanks a lot, Hassan. I'll keep in touch and I'll be messaging you separately on the side. Yeah.
All right.
All right, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Hassan. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye.